Hey gang, going back to May 25th, 1979. It is here, over here, O'Hare Airport, on a fateful afternoon that Flight 191, American Airlines, took off. 258 people on board that flight, 13 crew members. The engine flew off as the plane rotated and came down in this area right here, Des Plaines, Illinois. What you're looking at here is the canine area, canine training for the police. Everyone was doomed. We're going to go over to the memorial down the road here, and I'm going to tell you more about this story. And then we're going to go to the cemetery to visit one of the victims. We are at the memorial here, and it's a beautiful wall that has the name of every single person that was on the manifest. Coming from that location was very moving for me. And I might add, where I was standing was just yards away from where she came down. Trailer park wasn't hit. Where that canine unit training area is now is the epicenter. And it is amazing that only 2 people on the ground were killed. Just sad as it may be, it was just fortunate that, and those pilots had no control. But I think God had control. These are the names of the people to be remembered. There is a name on here of someone that I know. His name, well, I know him indirectly. I knew his wife very well, Avis. Avis, if you see this, R.I.P. to your husband, James. Avis was supposed to be on this flight. She typically was. And Avis lives in Los Angeles, Laguna Beach area. I see Kathleen Adduci. We are going to visit Kathleen's grave next. There's a nice bio on her on Find a Grave. But I want to include some more, as many of the names that we can here. But I wanted to point out there was a husband-wife that died in this crash along with everyone here, and they had a remarkable pair of daughters. Of course, they're still alive. And that is Bill and Corrine Borchers. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Their daughter, Kim, and I apologize, I don't remember the other daughter's name. I was just talking to a gentleman here, Gene, who runs this upkeep. It was really Kim at the Decatur Classical School in Chicago that made all this possible. The students, no help from American Airlines specifically. All they could do was get the manifest and barely got that. Thank you very much to American Airlines. And with the help of Jan Schakowsky, politics at work in a good way, the kids designed and put this whole thing together. A lot of effort. And made this happen. This is a story that's kind of fading away a little bit. So many names, guys. So many names. All right, we are going to head over to the cemetery right now, and we're going to pay our respects. We are here to visit one of the victims of Flight 191. I thought I'd stop by Daryl's grave. Daryl is my best friend who passed away many years ago. He was a great guy. He had a big heart. And I just thought I would just tell you a little bit about him. He was a legend in my eyes, a few years older, guy I looked up to. And the big thing that we did together is we'd go to the Northwoods. He's kind of the guy that reintroduced me to the Northwoods and all the outdoors of a little place called Lake Tomahawk, Wisconsin, where we had a lot of great memories on a place called South Two Lake. So I just thought I'd stop by and pay tribute to Daryl like I always do when I come out here, but I thought I'd take you along with me today. So let's head over to Kathleen's grave, Kathleen Adduci, and I will tell you her story. Okay, let's walk to Kathleen's grave. It's a beautiful place here on the front eastern side of the cemetery. Now, let me start by saying I am a pilot, so I know a little bit about some of the technicalities here that happen. I have a couple thousand hours. I'm a bush pilot. I owned a 206, a de Havilland Beaver, and now a 208 Caravan Amphib, instrument rated. So a lot of these things really hit home. I'm going to try and keep things real layman, simple, as I explain them. But did you ever wonder why the pilots in the commercial jets, when you take off, did you ever wonder why, as soon as the plane, what we call rotates, it like aims almost, it seems like vertical with full power, and it's going up like a rocket as fast as it can? Well, it's true, because we say as pilots, altitude is your friend. And the most vulnerable time of an aircraft is always immediately after takeoff. Once you leave the ground, you are committed. There's no parachutes, well, at that low altitude. Some planes, smaller planes have them now. There's no stopping, special brakes, and that's the ball game. If something goes wrong, you gotta be as high as you can, because the airplane can always, if you lost all engines, you could always glide it into the best possible place that you might be able to find in front of you. That's what we're taught. So when this plane took off, it was immediate. That engine on the left side, the port side, blew right off, because one of the pylons, which is what's holding the back of the engine on, it's multi-point, sheared, the bolt sheared, and it caused a domino effect of series of events in microseconds, where if you were to see it, which some people did, basically the engine, with all the thrust that's pulling the airplane, came off. It went up and over backwards. It was kind of pulling and sheared the whole thing. The whole thing just sheared right off. It went right over the top of the wing. It just missed the tail by some miraculous reason, but it wouldn't have mattered, because when it sheared off, it took out all the hydraulics, and it also critically disconnected some of the main buses for the electrical. Now, us pilots, we have a lot of, there's redundant systems, backup systems, but we have all kinds of redundancies and training and everything else. But in this case, some of the critical safety factors were severed. And one is called the stall warning. And in small planes, it's a beeper or a buzzer. But in big jets like that, it's a light that comes on, and they call it the shaker. And that is on the yoke. I mean, if you can picture, the yoke is like the steering wheel. I'm being layman terms. And
we'll see what happens.
It shakes. And the whole idea is what you don't want to do no matter what in any situation is stall the aircraft.
So
that means when the wings lose lift, it's not going fast enough, and the wings are what's holding the aircraft up. And if you lose lift, obviously it's just going to fall. And when it falls like that, instead of gliding down, it spins down like a dart. Not good. So when the problem they ran into is when all of this started happening, this series of events that happened in microseconds, they really didn't have any, none of their stall warning didn't work. And what happened was they're trained to slow that aircraft down to a minimal speed to put less stress. And what happened was, and I'm not going to get into all the complicated details, but there were wing leading edges and flaps and things that lost their hydraulics, so the whole thing got misconfigured, and they slowed down to enough where the plane lost critical flying speed, and that's why it rolled to the left and subsequently crashed. And again, missing that trailer park, wow, there were thousands. I drove through that trailer park. It is so packed in there. There had to be literally thousands of people that would have been killed. Now, when the airplane stalls like that, you have no control. It's just flipping over, and it was just by the grace of God that it hit where it did in that field. So that's kind of the overview of the accident. Now, when they did the crash investigation, they found we had human error in maintenance, and that was the cause. And it was American Airlines, and I believe it was also Continental was doing this. When they were doing service on those engines, which weigh 5 tons, they would use a forklift to hold it in place while they disconnected it. And in this particular incident, as ludicrous as that was to start with, during the whole process, they had a shift change. So they just left the forklift sitting there with the engine. And when the new crew came, they repositioned the forklift. So it's putting all this stress on these bolts, and they were just doing it the wrong way. So that thing was just doomed. It was just ready to go. Now, let's talk about fate. Crazy fate. I showed you at the memorial, Avis, she was supposed to be on that flight. How many stories like that just on that flight? There were probably a bunch. But the biggest one that I came to think of was the pilot. He was not supposed to be on that. He was not supposed to be flying that. He's not supposed to be captaining that flight. He had just come from Phoenix. It was Captain Walter Lux, 53 years old. And he'd been flying that DC-10 for a long, long time. And there is, with his experience, he was equal to the task as Sully was. You could almost compare him, but he really didn't have a plane that was functioning. First Officer James Dillard, who was 49 years old, had a lot of hours in the DC-10. But it was fate. It was so sad because when he came back from Phoenix, just landed, he went to crew where the crew was gathering, and another pilot came and said, "Hey, I've got some really important commitment here. Can you take my place for this flight to Los Angeles, which he had to think about because he had a big Memorial weekend planned with his family. But it just goes to show you what a great guy he was, that he sacrificed his weekend plans so that he could help out a friend, a colleague. Wow, and he paid for it with his life. Otherwise, he'd probably still be here even today. Pretty old, but he probably could be still around. So sad. So fate is unbelievable, and we're going to talk about fate with Kathleen Adduci. This is her grave. It was a similar situation for Kathleen. I'm going to come from the side here. I see right off, this is her inscription. 1956, 1979, daughter. I see her mother and father are here also. So, sorry about the wind, guys. It's really crazy. Just nothing we can do about that. It's Lorraine, 1931 to 1981, and Peter passed in 1997, both well after the crash. Actually, Mom died 2 years later. You just have to believe that had something to do with it. So sad. So many lives affected in these disasters. So let's talk a little bit about Kathleen. Well, I do know that Kathleen was from Homewood, Illinois, to the south here. And she had graduated from Homewood Flossmoor High School, a very well-known school here, I might add. And she was enrolled at Prairie State College in their nursing program. So she was studying to be a nurse. And she worked part-time at the South Suburban Hospital in Hazel Crest. Now, years later, her brother was recalling that she was supposed to get married that year on June 2nd. And that wedding was called off. She was very upset about it. And she had decided that after talking to her mom and probably her sister, but I think her mom was influential in saying, hey, you need to maybe take a trip, go with your friends, recharge, and get your mind off this wedding. Why don't you go to Hawaii? And that's what her two other friends were talking about, going to Hawaii. So sadly, that was the first leg, I believe, of the trip where they were going to Hawaii, because her other two friends, Gail DeCastro and Rhonda DeYoung, also perished in the crash. At her funeral, Kathleen was described as a sweet and beautiful daughter and sister who had many, many friends. She had bought a new Pontiac Firebird with her sister in tow, and they went to go sign the papers and bring it home. And her sister said that Kathleen was so proud of it. So proud of it. I see, of course, that her parents are here and they're all reunited. Kathleen has two sisters and two brothers, I presume, are still alive. So we wish them the best of health and happiness. And for the family, we hope you are resting in peace, Kathleen, Lorraine, and Peter.